You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your Security Plus certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Isolation in cybersecurity means deliberately separating workloads, users, or system functions so that a compromise in one area does not automatically spill over into others. This principle is rooted in the idea of containment. By limiting what different parts of an environment can see or touch, organizations reduce the chance that a single breach becomes catastrophic. For example, if a web server is isolated from a database server, an attacker exploiting the web layer cannot immediately move laterally to access sensitive records. Isolation, therefore, is about reducing mutual risk and creating deliberate boundaries that attackers must struggle to cross. Logical isolation techniques are the most widely used because they can be implemented through software and configuration without requiring new hardware. Virtual Local Area Networks, VLANs, divide network traffic into distinct groups, even when devices share the same physical infrastructure. Namespaces, often used in containerized environments, ensure that processes operate with separate views of system resources. Access controls provide logical separation by restricting which users or services can access certain systems. These methods create invisible walls inside shared environments, providing the benefits of isolation without the costs of building separate physical infrastructure. Physical isolation becomes necessary in high-assurance scenarios where logical controls are not considered sufficient. This could involve placing classified systems on entirely separate hardware, networks, or even in distinct facilities with no physical connection to less secure environments. For instance, a military system handling secret intelligence might be physically isolated from any internet-connected network. While costly and less flexible, physical isolation removes the risk of crossover between trusted and untrusted systems. It represents the most extreme form of separation, used when the stakes of compromise are so high that logical boundaries alone cannot be trusted. Microsegmentation refines isolation by controlling traffic within data centers or cloud environments, often referred to as east-west traffic. Traditional perimeter defenses focus on north-south flows traffic entering or leaving the network. However, once inside, attackers often move laterally across systems. Microsegmentation places fine-grained policies at the workload level, allowing only approved communications even within trusted environments. This dramatically limits the blast radius of a breach, as attackers cannot freely pivot. In cloud-native settings, microsegmentation becomes especially powerful, enabling security policies that move with workloads rather than relying on static network designs. Process and container isolation add further granularity at the host level. Modern operating systems can restrict processes from accessing each other's memory or files, ensuring that one compromised application cannot spy on or interfere with another. Containers take this further by providing lightweight isolation for entire workloads running on the same host. If an attacker compromises a container, proper isolation prevents them from breaking out into the underlying host or other containers. This pattern supports high-density, multi-tenant environments where separation at the process and container levels is the last line of defense against cross-contamination. Sandboxing is a practical application of isolation for untrusted code or file uploads. A sandbox provides a controlled environment where potentially malicious content can run without risking the broader system. For instance, an email security system may open attachments in a sandbox to observe behavior before delivering them to the user. Sandboxes allow defenders to test and analyze suspicious code in real time, gaining insights into its intent while protecting production systems. By isolating untrusted activity, sandboxes create a buffer zone, allowing innovation and user interaction without opening the doors wide to attackers. Monitoring objectives must align closely with isolation zones and enforcement points. Each boundary created by isolation also becomes a logical place to observe activity. For example, traffic flowing between segmented networks should be logged and inspected for policy violations. Within isolated workloads, process activity should be monitored for suspicious behaviors. Monitoring is not just about visibility, but about ensuring that the boundaries created by isolation remain intact. Hardening means treating isolation not as a set-and-forget strategy, but as a structure that requires continuous observation and validation. Telemetry placement plays a major role in effective monitoring. Collecting events at the right enforcement points prevents blind spots, ensuring attackers cannot move unnoticed. For example, placing sensors inside container hosts, at network gateways, and within cloud orchestration platforms provides layered visibility. However, too much telemetry in the wrong places can overwhelm analysts with noise while still leaving gaps. Hardening requires thoughtful placement, strategically monitoring where risk is highest, and ensuring that each isolated environment has adequate, but not excessive, coverage. The goal is comprehensive insight without unmanageable complexity. Centralized versus distributed monitoring introduces important trade-offs. Centralized systems aggregate logs and telemetry into a single location, simplifying correlation and analysis. However, this approach can introduce latency and may become a single point of failure. Distributed monitoring spreads sensors and analysis closer to the isolated zones themselves, reducing latency but increasing complexity. Enterprises often adopt hybrid approaches, combining local sensors with central aggregation. Hardening is about striking balance, ensuring data flows efficiently to analysts while still maintaining resilience and performance across isolated environments. Monitoring architecture must evolve with both scale and risk. Establishing baseline behaviors within each isolation domain allows anomaly detection to become meaningful. What is normal in one domain may be abnormal in another, so baselines must be tuned accordingly. For example, heavy file transfers may be common in a development sandbox, but highly suspicious in a finance database segment. Once baselines are established, deviations become signals for investigation. This local context ensures anomalies are not dismissed or misinterpreted. Hardening means not only isolating systems, but also understanding their natural rhythms, enabling defenders to recognize when something unusual signals compromise. Logging within isolated environments requires careful planning. Logs must be collected consistently and transported securely to central collectors without risk of tampering or interception. Encryption ensures logs remain trustworthy in transit, while digital signing can prevent attackers from altering records. Without such protections, logs may become unreliable, undermining their value during investigations. Hardening ensures that monitoring data itself is secured as rigorously as the systems it represents. After all, defenders cannot respond effectively if they cannot trust the accuracy and integrity of their own visibility. Ultimately, isolation reduces the attack surface by limiting opportunities for lateral movement, while monitoring ensures that isolation remains effective in practice. One without the other is incomplete. Isolation without monitoring becomes silent and fragile, while monitoring without isolation leaves defenders drowning in events from sprawling, interconnected systems. Together they create layered resilience. Hardening through isolation and monitoring transforms complex environments into segmented, observable systems where attackers encounter barriers at every step and defenders remain equipped to see and respond quickly to breaches. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Isolation becomes even more powerful when combined with policy enforcement points and centralized decision-making systems. Enforcement points, or PEPs, sit at the boundaries of isolated zones and ensure traffic and activity follow defined policies. Centralized policy decision points, or PDPs, evaluate requests and push down instructions to PEPs. This model ensures that security controls are consistently applied across environments, while still adapting to contextual information such as user identity or device posture. Hardening requires this combination of localized enforcement with centralized intelligence, striking a balance between precision at the edge and consistency across the enterprise. Host and network-based sensors should be tailored to each isolated environment. A high-security database zone may rely more heavily on host-based integrity monitoring, while an IoT segment may need stronger network-based anomaly detection. Tailoring ensures that defenses are not generic but optimized for the risks present in each zone. By placing the right type of sensor in the right environment, organizations maximize visibility without wasting resources. Hardened monitoring is not about one-size-fits-all coverage, but about deploying specialized eyes and ears that can pick up the unique signals of compromise in their respective zones. Honeypots and decoy segments introduce a proactive layer of defense within isolated networks. By deploying deliberately vulnerable or enticing systems, organizations can lure attackers away from valuable targets and observe their tactics. Decoy environments serve as monitored traps, raising immediate alerts when adversaries interact with them. This not only provides early warning, but also generates intelligence on attacker behavior. In advanced environments, honeypots are tailored to specific domains, such as mimicking an IoT network or simulating a financial system. Hardening is not only about defense, but also about turning attacker activity into actionable insight. Integrity monitoring ensures that isolated zones remain uncompromised internally. File integrity monitoring, process integrity checks, and configuration validation all confirm that systems continue to operate as expected. If tampering occurs, such as an attacker modifying binaries or altering key settings, integrity tools generate alerts for defenders. This is particularly important inside isolated domains, where lateral detection is difficult. By embedding integrity checks, organizations ensure that even if an attacker crosses a boundary, tampering cannot go unnoticed. Hardening here means equipping systems with the ability to self-report corruption or alteration in real time. Monitoring data flows between isolation zones is another critical practice. Attackers often attempt to exfiltrate data by moving it quietly between trusted and less trusted environments. By watching these flows, organizations can spot violations of policy, such as sensitive data crossing into guest networks, or unusual traffic leaving restricted zones. Data flow monitoring turns isolation boundaries into checkpoints, verifying that only sanctioned interactions occur. Hardened environments use strict policies to govern cross-zone communication and enforce them with visibility, ensuring that data does not leak silently across invisible divides. Automated containment actions add speed to incident response when isolated domains show signs of compromise. If an endpoint in a finance zone begins behaving suspiciously, automated controls can immediately quarantine it, severing its connections until a human analyst investigates. Similarly, if telemetry reveals a rogue process inside a container, the container can be killed automatically. Containment reduces attacker dwell time, cutting off their ability to spread. Hardening requires accepting that compromises may occur, but designing systems that react faster than human response alone can achieve. Automation ensures defenses act at machine speed. Telemetry aggregation across isolated environments must preserve context. Events from one domain may look harmless in isolation but become significant when correlated with activity elsewhere. For instance, a login in one zone followed by unusual traffic in another may indicate lateral movement. Aggregation patterns must ensure that context is retained, timestamps, origin, and zone identity remain intact, so analysts can piece together coherent narratives. Hardening requires thoughtful data handling so that defenders are not left with fragments, but with a clear picture of unfolding events. High-volume telemetry presents challenges that require secure forwarding and compression strategies. Isolation zones often generate significant amounts of log and sensor data, and moving it to central collectors can overwhelm bandwidth or storage. Compression reduces the burden, while secure forwarding ensures the data is not intercepted or tampered with in transit. Hardened designs account for these operational realities, ensuring telemetry flows remain trustworthy and efficient even under heavy load. Security controls are only as useful as the data they produce, Safeguarding the pipeline ensures defenders always have reliable visibility. Validation of isolation boundaries must go beyond design documents and include active testing. Penetration tests and red team exercises focused on segmentation controls reveal whether attackers can bypass or exploit weak points. These exercises simulate real adversaries attempting to cross boundaries or exfiltrate data, providing assurance that isolation works as intended. Without validation, organizations may assume boundaries are secure when misconfigurations leave gaps. Hardening demands proof, not assumption, that the walls stand firm against determined attack. Regular testing ensures isolation remains an effective defense rather than an unverified concept. Retention and forensic readiness ensure that logs and evidence from isolated domains remain available for investigations. Logs should be stored long enough to reconstruct events, encrypted to maintain integrity, and indexed to allow efficient queries. Forensic readiness also means documenting processes for collecting evidence without contaminating it, so findings stand up in both technical and legal reviews. Hardened environments recognize that monitoring is not just about real-time defense, but also about retrospective analysis. Forensics bridges the gap between incident detection and long-term accountability. Governance ties the entire model together. Isolation policies define who can access what, and governance ensures these policies are managed responsibly. Clear rules about who may change segmentation rules, how approvals are obtained, and how audits are performed prevent misuse or accidental weakening of defenses. Governance ensures isolation remains intentional rather than ad hoc, protecting against both insider threats and administrative errors. Hardening requires more than technology. It requires disciplined oversight that aligns security boundaries with organizational priorities and compliance requirements. Ultimately, combining isolation with tailored monitoring creates a defense posture that is both strong and observable. Isolation provides the walls that limit attacker movement, while monitoring ensures defenders know when those walls are being tested or breached. Together, they transform complex environments into compartmentalized, transparent systems where compromises can be detected quickly and contained effectively. This blend of separation and visibility embodies the principle of defense in depth, turning cybersecurity from a static barrier into a dynamic, resilient system of layered protections. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.